Welcome back to the news today. The tens of thousands of refugees fleeing Syria hope to find a better life in the West. But the links, real or reported, between Paris terror attacks and the refugees have created a climate of fear and sparked a fierce debate whether to accept them or not. I-24 News reporter Shanina Khshoni has more.
While Europe and Middle Eastern countries such as Jordan and Turkey are taking in Syrian refugees, a lot of criticism has been leveled at North America for not opening its door to them. This week, new Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Ottawa would take in 25,000 refugees. His statement drew fire from political rivals and from the public, a shift from the warm welcome he received from the Canadian people and media.
One of the things that is most important right now is for a country like Canada to demonstrate how to make accepting large numbers of refugees not just a challenge or a problem, but an opportunity.
South of the border, the United States has long been proud of its reputation as a country built by immigrants, the subject now of a vigorous internal debate.
When individuals say that we should have a religious test and that only Christians, proven Christians, should be admitted, that's offensive and contrary to American values.
Our nation has always been welcoming, but we cannot let terrorists take advantage of our compassion. This is a moment where it's better to be safe than to be sorry.
The White House recruited the former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and Google co-founder Sergey Brin to address the American public via social networks with the slogan, "Refugee Welcome." But even so, after the attack on Paris and the links to the perpetrators to Syria, the Obama administration will find it difficult to convince Americans that Syrian refugees are not all connected to terror.
We can't act as though we're shutting the doors to people in need without undermining who we are as Americans and the values we have stood for.
Yes, and joining me to discuss these matters are Daniel Shek, former Israeli ambassador to France. Good evening. Hi. Also, Levanon, former Israeli ambassador to Egypt. Good evening, Ambassador.
Good evening.
And also Ayman Sikseck, I-24 News correspondent.
Good evening.
Good evening. So, you know, it seems that for the last few days, if I'm hearing the leaders of the world, some of the leaders of the world, they don't want to make the connection between the refugee crisis and the terror attacks in Paris. It's like if you are making the connection, you are doing like a big mistake, you are doing a big sin towards all this issue. And my question is, how do you see it? How do you see, should we do the connection or not?
Of course you should, but the question is not, I mean, it's not a zero-sum game. If you make the connection, you shut the doors and no refugees come in. That is not an acceptable, I mean, morally not acceptable and logically not acceptable. It's like saying if there was, I don't know, an American guy who went into a school and shot 15 people, you will no longer admit Americans into Europe. It's exactly the same thing.
Which happens
what it means
a lot
that it puts more responsibility on the authorities that are screening these refugees. We spoke about it the other night. It is clear that if indeed, and it's no longer an if, it's proven that at least one of these people used the path, the route coming from Syria into Europe, that means that the screening methods must be more stringent, that maybe the process cannot be as expedited as it is today. All that is bad news for the rest of the refugees, but it's just more discomfort. It doesn't mean that Europe suddenly says, listen, sorry, there were a few people who really behaved very badly, go back to Syria. That, I think, for a Western country is not an acceptable approach.
But in these Western countries, we are seeing population and a society that's going more and more to the right. A society that demands from its governments to be stronger. Just see what is happening here in Israel the minute that we have a terror attack. The minute that we have a terror attack, everybody goes, kill them, finish them. We need to go and find them. And nobody's talking, just wait a second, let's just count until 10 and start understanding what is happening here and what is the process?
Look, this is a complex situation. First of all, I don't think that we should do the connection. Definitely not. Because what happened in Paris is not as a direct consequences of the refugee issue. This is something completely different. Although, Ambassador Shek is right, that one or two people, they came, through Greece, and they reach, Paris easily with the train. It's open. But you cannot make the connection. The problem with the refugees, it is a completely different issue. And it is understandable that people in Europe, even in the United States, but we are talking about Europe, they fear this flux of people coming, for refugees, for the simple reason that they might change, the social situation, or they might, introduce some radical ideas, or etc., which is completely legitimate. But you cannot make the connection as a consequence between one situation and another situation. You have to deal with the issue of the refugees as is the problem of the refugees. Where to have them, what kind of help you can extend to them, what to do with them, incorporate them in the schools or in the society, to leave them in different places. This is a completely different story, but not to connect between act of violence or violent acts with the question of the refugees.
Well, Lucy, the fear that Ambassador Levanon is pointing to of people from the refugees is central to the story. And there are leaders who are using this fear. There are leaders who are clearly making the connection. In France, Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Front, is rising. Polls are showing that she's rising. She's always been against the migration of refugees into France. She's been against the Muslim community within France, calling street prayers similar to the Nazi occupation, that these people are occupying the streets of France. And this is a sense of fear of Islam that she's now capitalizing on. And there is a shift from January, since the Charlie Hebdo attacks. We saw back then, leaders, social leaders, political leaders in France saying, don't demonize all Muslims. There should be solidarity with Muslims within France. They're not all terrorists. This is not happening now. And we need to ask ourselves why. And the reason is, I think this was an attack that French people see as an attack on France, as opposed to an attack on, in Charlie Hebdo's case, freedom of speech or offensive cartoons to some parts of the population, or the Hyper Cacher attacks, which was a targeted attack against a religious community. This is an attack on France as a country.
Now, I'm thinking about, just like you said, this is an attack on France as a country, and I'm trying to think what is passing in the minds of these refugees that are still doing the way from Syria to Europe, and they're asking themselves, okay, how would they accept us right now? How would they open their doors? Because I saw the video of Aboud just went out, and he was talking about one specific thing, karami, which is respect, and karama and ihtiram. How he's asking, you continue to get this treatment from the European, and you are just staying there and feeling part of this country. You're being humiliated each and every day, and you're not doing anything about that. He is giving the answers to the security forces, to the government in France, to the governments in all Europe, and it seems that nobody wants to touch this because maybe we did a huge mistake.
Well, we'll probably agree around here that we won't take him as a moral barometer.
No, of course
okay?
not. No, of course not.
And you're completely right. Fear has risen, and I think it's a very human phenomenon. People are, in face of such a shocking event, people lose nuance. They sort of see things in black and white. And you said count to 10. Yes, counting to 10 is a very important feature of the human mind. It's difficult in such times. The event is fresh in people's minds. They are bombarded by images and 24-hour news feeds, etc., etc. It will take some time to settle. I hope that the lessons learned by European governments will not only be in the security level, and that the way these waves of immigrants and refugees will be integrated into European societies will be more intelligent than what happened with the waves of immigrants from the 60s and 50s and 60s from North Africa, which have basically created the ghettos around French cities and around other places. That
look,
was,
Daniel, look, you cannot, escape from the people to feel this fear because it is justified. It's justified.
Just what I said.
You see, those people, take, this Abu Aoud.
Yes.
He's the second or third generation of refugees who came to Europe, and see what he is doing. So if I am an European, I cannot, avoid, from thinking that, look, those people, maybe there are a fifth column here. So you cannot waive this.
Isaac, that is the question. Define they. That is the whole question. Where do you put the borderline between all non-Muslim Europeans and all Muslim Europeans, or just between all Europeans, regardless of their religion, and the Islamic extremists?
Look, let me start by a simple definition. I think that we spoke about this in this studio. The majority, the huge majority of the Muslims living in Europe who came as a refugee, they are normal people. They are okay. They are perfect. The problem with what's happening, and this is exactly, in Israel or in the Middle East or elsewhere, this is the minority. The minority who is doing the problems. Now, probably Europe has failed in educating these people, or in assimilating these people, or incorporating these people or these youngsters into the society. Or probably this was matched also by a desire of these people to stay, apart. They don't want to be part of the society.
Let's join to this conversation. Maybe he heard part of it. There's Jean-Paul Ney, a journalist from France. Jean-Paul, pleasure to have you again.
Hello. How are you, Lucy?
All good, all good. So did you hear part of the conversation here?
Oh, yeah, some part, because we are working hard here. I know you are discussing, and that is very important. I heard some part of the discussion. Yeah, Lucy.
Jean-Paul, I'm asking you, we've been discussing here the problem with the refugees. And how would the refugees coming now from Syria will be accepted by the French people, by the German, by Sweden, by all parts of Europe? How would the people accept them when the governments are doing the connections between what is happening in Syria, the refugees, and what is happening in France?
Oh, Lucy, they didn't do the connection before what happened. But there was people like me, like a lot of others, terrorism specialists and jihadist network specialists that told to major, ministers, for example, the Minister of Interior or Minister of Defense, to be careful. And there's another study group that they told to everyone in France, even in articles in the press, in the television, please be careful. Try to have, human heart, no problem, but please, you can be human with the security aside. Bring them a special ID card, make a checkup, a backup, to see if they are really what they say they are. We have a lot of false Syrian passports, but we told everything. We told, and you know what the answer was from the socialist French government? You are fascist guys. Please take your hand, put it on the heart, and let us, bring the refugees to our cities. Okay, be human, but please have some security aside and make some background check to those guys. We have a lot of technology. I was to the Milipol meeting today, because we have now for 1 week the Salon Milipol in Paris, the Interior Security State Salon. And, we have a lot of systems, ID cards, biometry, drones, everything you want for security, fences and patrols, but we don't do nothing. We don't use it. We sell it. We export it. We do a lot of advertisements about France is good for security, but we don't apply this security to
we spoke the other day, and you told me that you spoke with your friends and part of them Muslims, and we talked about how education is a very, very important aspect of it. And I'm trying to think, what would be the future of these refugees is, because you are saying we asked them to put more security. And I'm hearing today in France, officials that are saying we don't have the ability to monitor all these people. We don't have the ability to monitor each and every person who maybe is going to the mosque, who maybe is getting a wrong education. So I'm asking, if the government is saying that it doesn't have the ability to do that, what can be done?
It's so difficult to create a special ministry for refugees, European, center for refugees. Every member of EU will give a special amount. We will, make a hub. We have to think like a hub, not like a country. We are a melting pot of cultures and countries, and so why we don't create a special, ministry, a special center to check the background of these refugees, to help them? It will be maybe a package, like a package that you can say when you have someone, okay, we will take you now. You will pass through maybe 2 or 10, phases, and when you will pass each phase, you will have to declare your identity, to see, to show us if you speak French, if you speak German, what you are able to do. Look, Madrid in Spain, they just helped this football trainer that was assaulted by a journalist. So we can do that, I think, but we don't have, again, Lucy, we don't have the courage. Everything, the base, everything, the root is the root of the courage.
You know what, Jean-Paul, I want to share with you a discussion that we had today here on I-24 News, and some of the people said that there is no Islamophobia in France, that there is no Islamophobia in Europe. Is it correct? There is no Islamophobia, and it's only lack of integration?
That's a very good question, Lucy. That's now a lot of time. I would like to discuss this with you. I hope we will have more time next time. But let me just tell you that in France there is no racism. Stop it, please. There is no Islamophobia. There's xenophobia. We don't know each other. We don't know our neighbor. We don't know the other. And if you don't know, you have false flags on it. So if you read press now, if you watch TV now, it's not a good time to be Muslim in France. But they have Muslims, French Muslims. They have to stand up and tell us that they are French. You know what happened just a few hours ago? There was a French Muslim functionary that works for state in France. He was the deputy director of the 93 in Saint-Denis, ex-deputy director. You know what he told us in front of the cameras? Bringing in front of the cameras his French ID card. He told us that the others, those who did that, are bastards, are bastard terrorists. That they don't have identity. They don't have any country in the head. They don't have a French art. That's a good first step for French Muslims. But again, there is no racism. Go, Lucy. Come with me in Paris. I will take you to the French suburbs. We will go to see the French police of the suburbs. You will see black faces, Arab faces, Jewish faces, and French faces. French as white as they want,
Yeah, you need to take me to this tour, Jean-Paul.
Yeah,
I need to see it in my own eyes. It's like, we are talking a lot and we're practically friends by now, but, it's like I will say that there is no racism in Israel at all. And there is. So we cannot ignore the era that we're living in. And the era that we're living in is that we are living in racist communities, if it's in Europe or it's in Israel or any other place in the world, even the United States.
The right word, Lucy, I think is xenophobia. Xenophobia. We don't know each other. We don't know them. I know them, but there's a lot of French people. They live inside the shell, like they just open it to go out and come back at house.
Yes.
And if you are walking aside a black or an Arab,
I'm taking you on the Paris tour. Be ready. I'm taking you on this tour.
Okay.
Jean-Paul Ney, thank you very much for having this conversation with us. Thank you very much. Let's see. Ayman Sikseck just did for us today. I know that you have a lot to say, but Ayman Sikseck did for us a report about this exact issue, Islamophobia in Europe. Let's see.
As the dust begins to settle after the Paris attacks and France takes a tougher military stance against the Islamic State group in Syria, Muslims within the Fifth Republic feel they may be in danger as well. In Lyon, home to a large Muslim French community, residents believe that fear of terrorism is quickly transforming into fear of Islam.
It falls on France, but it also falls on Muslims because we all have to pay. We are going to pay for what these people did Friday in Paris or what they did in January. We are the ones who have to explain, to justify ourselves, and to apologize for what we didn't do.
The French Muslim population has been under fire before, when the Charlie Hebdo killings in January prompted France to introduce aggressive surveillance systems designed to monitor mosques and identify extremists. But while the Charlie Hebdo attacks followed caricatures of Prophet Muhammad suggesting that the murders were based on religious discrimination, the recent attacks in Paris leave Muslims more susceptible to criticism. A recent report by Amnesty International suggests that Islamophobia in France is steadily on the rise.
We're especially worried by the increase in racist talk in France, be it anti-Semitism but also a lot of Islamophobia. Clearly, the situation is very worrying. We're witnessing hate talk, stigmas and discrimination. We're concerned with the targeting of individuals just because they belong to a certain religion.
The targeting of individuals suggested by Amnesty International is also becoming prevalent among French politicians. Political analysts say Marine Le Pen, leader of the far-right-wing National Front, could have a better chance in elections after the Paris attacks. Just last month, Le Pen was taken to court for comparing Muslims who pray in the streets of France to the Nazi occupation.
Street prayers are illegal. They are a way to take over a territory in order to impose a religious law, which is contrary to the law of the Republic and contrary to secular life.
Meanwhile, a similar debate is heating up outside of France, within the borders of its ally, the United States. At least 15 U.S. governors announced Monday they will refuse to accept Syrian refugees in their states. Alabama Governor Robert Bentley started the trend on Twitter, prompting more than a dozen governors to follow suit. In the U.S., too, analysts say, anti-Muslim sentiment is on the rise, fueled by eager politicians.
Don't worry, we'll take our country back very soon. Very soon.
Yes.
3 quick points.
Please.
First point. Is France an anti-Semitic country? No, it is not. Is there anti-Semitism in France? You bet there is. Is France an Islamophobic country? It is not. Is there Islamophobia? You bet there is. So that is the way to put it. With all my respect for Jean-Paul Ney, he is sanitizing the problem. Second point, he's right in saying there is xenophobia. You can call it the whole thing xenophobia, but there's a hierarchy within the xenophobia. And you can feel xenophobia if you're a Portuguese concierge, for example, which there are plenty of those in Paris, but you won't feel the same xenophobia as the visible minority. It can be a Muslim, it can be an African, or it can be a Jewish person. There is a hierarchy here. And the last point, which has to do with this report, is that, on the other hand, you cannot beautify the problem all the way to saying that, for example, it is not okay to use more stringent and more intrusive methods of gathering information in mosques than you do in churches. That would be a ridiculous claim, because just in the name of being equal, etc. Clearly, you have to focus on the places where the trouble comes from, and the trouble comes from the Muslim community and from mosques.
Look, Daniel and myself, we spent both several years in France. Although this is the country of liberté, égalité, fraternité, but I fully agree that there is a kind of anti-Islamic feelings or sentiments.
Call it anti-Arab than anti-Muslim, I would say.
Call it Islamophobia or call it whatever. I mean, this is a sentiment which is anti... Exactly like you have, in anti-Semitism.
Yes.
But you don't have any state anti-Semitism. You don't have any state Islamophobia. This is not the policy of France. This is, let's say, the behavior which emanates from the societies who are composing the overall society in France. You have the Muslim who thinks, that they're anti-Semitic, and you have, Marine Le Pen who thinks, about the Muslims, etc.
And also about the Jews.
And above all this, unfortunately, you have
we may one day see state anti-Semitism and Islamophobia if Marine Le Pen and her gang gain power.
We saw it.
Yes. Because you're staying with me for the third part, for the next part as well, Ayman, I want your comment on this.
Well, Lucy, before we head off with Jean-Paul Ney to a beautiful trip in Paris, let's take a look at what the leaders are telling us. Manuel Valls said on Friday, we need to expel all these radical imams. Who are the radical imams exactly? Which one is radical? It's unclear. François Hollande said that the saddest thing about this attack is that it was the French who attacked the French. Now, this rhetoric is pervasive. It's really establishing the feeling that the enemy is within. This is changing society slowly. So we might want to take that trip, but let's not live in France for too long, because in the name of security, privacy could now be sacrificed. There are more and more raids taking place, and personal space and the right of movement could be sacrificed as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Ayman Sikseck, for being with me. I'm going to take you on that trip, whether you like it or not.
It's worth the trip. I've done it a few times.
Definitely. You will come also. Who are going out for a small break. Daniel Shek and Yitzhak Levanon are still with me, and Dr. Hani Zubeda will be joining us. Don't go anywhere.